Are people asking this deadly question about your nonprofit? I hope not.
Hi, we are Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are nonprofit consultants because we believe a better world needs healthier nonprofits. Now, we found this really interesting post on Reddit, and it's someone outside of the nonprofit sector asking a question about nonprofit work, which is super interesting because as a leader of nonprofits, it's important for you to understand what other people are looking at, what they are considering, why they may or may not be joining. And sometimes we're so in it that we don't even understand why other people don't seem to get it. So as we're reading this today, this might give you some great insight to people that you are trying to recruit, that people you're trying to talk to, and maybe some of the questions that they might be asking about your organization.
And the questions that they're afraid to ask you directly because they feel awkward about it.
Yeah.
So let's jump into it. Here's the question. Have you ever come across a nonprofit that just didn't need to exist?
When I read this title, like my heart hurt a little bit. And part of this is because nonprofits get so used to just doing the stuff that they forget to explain why they exist. And so I've actually heard this question outside the context of this Reddit post too many times, or someone's like, what is this person even doing? Why does this nonprofit exist? Why does it have to happen like this? Are they even making a difference? This question is a big question, and you don't want it asked about your organization.
So here we go. One time I was talking to my friend who has worked in/held leadership positions in a few different nonprofits over the years, currently works for one, about a nonprofit in our area that to me seems totally unnecessary. And they said, first of all, people start way more nonprofits than should probably exist.
So a couple things here. The person writing this has an opinion. So we need to recognize that just because someone outside of our nonprofit gives us an opinion doesn't mean that their opinion is correct.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily make it true. Although
it doesn't necessarily make it true.
It's a good data point.
It's a good data point. Now, this response, first of all, people start way more nonprofits than should probably exist, is actually something that when we have people come to us and ask, should I start a nonprofit? We ask a lot of questions about it because while we highly value nonprofit work, sometimes it's easy to see a cause and jump in, assuming that the nonprofit model is the best model with which to tackle the issue. And sometimes we've seen people get the paperwork together, get a board together, and sit down for the first meeting and be like, we have no plan. We don't know what to do.
This was a bad idea.
This was a bad idea. And so a lot of nonprofits, I don't know if it's that they shouldn't exist, although maybe that's the case, but a lot of times there hasn't been enough forethought put into them. And we've seen this question asked about nonprofits that have been around for years.
And we're really open-minded about how situations and causes can be helped and solved in the world outside of the nonprofit realm. So nonprofit is just a tax designation. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that it's magical or something like that. It doesn't mean it's like magically you have money to work with, because you definitely don't.
And it doesn't mean that it's more moral. Just
right.
Because you have the tax designation. There are socialpreneurs, like entrepreneurs that care about social issues, doing fantastic work. So just because someone wants to jump into this, they might have a really good motivation for doing so, but that doesn't mean it's the best option given who they are, their abilities, and possibly even what the cause is.
All right. Let's see.
Have you ever come across this? Says, I don't mean one where maybe you don't agree with it, but one where they just seem to be totally ineffective, unnecessary, and or not well targeted to the community it's attempting to serve. So when we talk about our flywheel, this is a big one. This is someone who is considering becoming a follower, and they've started the process of considering, like, would I be the right person for this? I want to learn a little bit more about it. And what they're not getting is that vision statement. They're also looking back a little bit into what's being put out there in terms of the stories and the metrics. And they're saying the stories and the metrics got me interested enough to look at it, but these things aren't lining up with the vision. And I'm a part of this community, and I'm not sure if things are quite making sense.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's something to be said too about, are you actually making the impact? Because clearly this person is looking at the stories and the measurable impact and saying, they're not really making a difference. So why are we even doing this?
Yeah.
And that's a really big question to be asking about your nonprofit, your organization. Are we making a difference? Are we making a big enough difference that someone from the outside, and we're going to learn more about this person in a second, that they could be a good fit for this nonprofit if they actually had good measurable impact.
Yeah, and just because a nonprofit is busy or keeping its staff or its volunteers busy doesn't mean it's making an impact. Sometimes it's easy to get so busy with work that you forget to look up and say, but did we make a difference in the work that we're doing? So let's read a little bit more. The nonprofit I was telling my friend about seems like it tried to fabricate a need for programming where there wasn't any need, and then shoehorn some unneeded programming into a community that is not interested.
Ouch. So that's a really, really good, like when you try to run some kind of programming for your nonprofit, you should look at the attendance to that event, the impact that that event made, and use that as a data point to say, is this the right kind of thing for this community? Should we be in a different community? Okay, if not, then what should we be doing to reach this community, to help this community?
Right. There's a difference between seeing a need in a community and knowing the needs of that community. Mm-hmm. So there might actually be a need for it. So I'm not going to rule it out. But it could be that the person said, programming is super important and this community doesn't have any programming outlets. Therefore, programming is needed. I'm going to start a nonprofit. Where they might not have gone into the community and just done a quick survey to see if anyone actually wants programming. Just because something isn't there doesn't mean it's needed.
Yep. And I think in this specific article, they're talking about like programming as far as like doing programs. They're not talking about like coding or programming like computers. They're saying, you know, what's the need for event programming, like the kind of programming, especially like churches will do programs.
I totally read that wrong. I was like, nerdiness.
I know it could be read a different way, but I think this really, I mean, it makes a little bit more sense in the sense that this nonprofit totally is trying to do some sort of nonprofit programming in the community, and it's not received and it's not engaged with, and no one's really interacting with it. So what's important to remember is that in the community that you're in, you may have a mission to reach and help that community. Your programming might just be completely off. It might be a completely wrong thing. For example, you might say, hey, we want to feed our community, so we are going to do a potato drive. But your community might hate potatoes. So maybe it's better to do a meat drive, right? Like, that's a weird example. But I think a lot of nonprofits get it in their head like, I have the right way to fix the problem. Not thinking about what are the needs of the people they're trying to help and what do the people actually feel that they need, and then reaching them there.
I got that so wrong. Anyway, valid point still. The nonprofit is not very well organized or managed. The programs have extremely low attendance. So either they're having trouble devising the programs that people want to attend, or they're having difficulty marketing these programs.
It's probably devising the programs people actually want to attend.
I might actually say it might be that because they're not well organized and managed.
Oh, so maybe even. If
you take it a step further back, they might be in so much chaos that they can't even see if their programs are wanted, needed. They might feel like their programs are incredibly well attended because they were so busy leading up to the programs that they have equated busyness with impact and helping people.
This line is really, really awful. Some of the leadership appears to be involved more for appearances than anything else.
This is a huge deal. If you're looking at a board member who just wants something on their resume more than actually wanting to help your cause, that's an issue. If you're looking at a leader within your organization who just really likes the shiny, pretty pictures, but isn't actually willing to get their hands dirty and do the work, that's an issue. And a leader in a position like this, people see it and they actually run away from that leader, even if they care about the cause, because they know that leader isn't going to be looking out for their best interest. And if you have a leader who's concerned about appearances, when crap hits the fan, they're going to blame the volunteers 100% of the time.
It's so true. It totally happens.
It's frustrating because this nonprofit has tried to recruit me as a member volunteer many times. The fact that they had to write many twice means that it's probably been numerous. And the nonprofit never asked, my guess is the nonprofit never asked why they are declining. They say, I'm the target demographic and I'm acquainted with some of the leadership. I don't want to join. Actually, I flat out refuse to join for all the aforementioned reasons.
Oh, this sentence is so good. I'd be more public with my thoughts on this because wouldn't community feedback be useful for them? But I feel like denouncing a not-for-profit usually looks bad. They're just trying to help people, right? Right? But they're doing it badly.
Yes, publicly denouncing a nonprofit is bad. I mean, like, socially, people aren't going to receive it well, even if you're correct.
Right.
So what I mean by bad isn't necessarily like morally right or wrong, as much as it's not going to give you the benefit, because publicly denouncing anyone just makes people get on the defense and they're not willing to hear what you have to say. So denouncing it, not beneficial. If you're willing to give actual feedback one-on-one, and next time they try to recruit you, because they probably will, because they haven't gotten the hint, saying something like, listen, you've asked me multiple times. Can I just be honest with you for a second? Ask for permission and then give them feedback. If you give them feedback and they do not change based on your feedback, wash your hands. Just don't worry about it going forward. You can, answer if you want to, but don't spend your time trying to change an organization that doesn't want to change. However, they might have a whole bunch of people who just aren't willing to be honest with them. So if you want to be honest and give them a couple things that maybe they could do just a little bit better. Don't throw every issue at them. Maybe one or two little points and see if they're willing to make changes, because you might be surprised.
Now take this from the flip side. As the nonprofit leader, what you could be doing in this kind of situation, if you're trying to recruit a volunteer and they just keep saying no, or they keep ghosting you or whatever, when you finally do get a hold of them, don't pressure them into trying to serve again, but instead ask them, hey, can I ask for just like a little bit of honest feedback? I've asked if you wanted to volunteer a bunch of times and you're not going to hurt my feelings if you give me an honest answer. I really want to know what it is about this that makes it not work for you. Because it's not just you. It's also people like you. Like, what makes this not work for people that are also in your similar situation?
Yep.
So give them permission to feel comfortable telling you, because this person is clearly not comfortable talking to the people in the nonprofit other than saying no. They're not comfortable saying why.
Yep. And so if you can make space for that as a leader, your organization can make a lot more impact long term, because you start to realize those different data points. Not every data point should be taken with like 100% trust. We're going to run with it. But as you start collecting them, you'll start to see the trends. And as you see the trends, you can start to fix those areas. Back to this. Anyway, I generally do appreciate the time, effort, and funding many people put into running their nonprofit organizations. And I've been involved with many over the years. But some nonprofits seem to exist solely because some well-off person offhandedly decided it was a good idea without stopping to consider what community need the nonprofit would actually be addressing, and or whether they or their leadership could handle the business aspects of running the nonprofit.
Wow.
This is a very, very well thought out point. I mean,
Yeah.
The fact that they use the word aforementioned earlier, I appreciate. But it's very, very clear. This person, they're not just upset about nonprofits in general. They care about them.
Yeah, they served in a bunch of them, they said.
Yeah. And they did say, like, some well-off person offhandedly decided it was a good idea. We have seen well-off people do this. We've also seen people who have almost no money do this. And they do have incredibly good intentions. But we've seen too many nonprofits start where there isn't the care brought into it about whether or not they can run the business side of it. Now, nonprofits are not for profit, but they have to be run like a business. But in a lot of ways, they're even harder because you're not able to pay people.
Right.
And we have actually seen nonprofit leaders start nonprofits because they told us, well, I think I should start a nonprofit because I don't think I'm capable of starting a business. And that's a big red flag, because there are so many aspects, so many business aspects behind the scenes, and you have to have a heightened emotional intelligence to be able to work with all the leaders who are volunteers.
Work with the leaders, the donors. You really have to have be able to catch the pulse of what's going on in the community you're trying to help, in the community that is partnering with you, the donors, the volunteers, people that are giving you their networks. Like, it takes, I don't want to say it's harder than the business sector, but it's at least equally as hard.
Yeah.
I would say in a lot of ways, there are things that are more challenging. Especially, like you said, you have to get people to work for you and give you money rather than you giving them a product and them giving you money.
Yeah. There's no value exchange. I mean, there is. There is a value exchange, but it's not one that is as obvious or as tangible as a paycheck.
Right.
So you should take this last line because I know you appreciate it.
I love this. Insert Jeff Goldblum Jurassic Park meme. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. It's so true. I mean, so if you're thinking about starting a nonprofit, think about it. Like, actually think about whether you should, not just whether you could. And then secondarily, be thinking about the fact that, well, not if you're starting, but like if you're already doing a nonprofit, be thinking about, how do I look at this from the angle of somebody on the outside? Maybe ask people on the outside, give them permission to give you real honest feedback, so you don't have these kind of conversations happening in your community. Not like you want to stamp them down, but you want to make your nonprofit good enough that these aren't the kind of conversations that happen.
Absolutely. And if you're someone who is listening to this going, oh my gosh, we have people like this who aren't quite, like they're not involved and we want them to be involved. We're not quite sure how to get them involved. And it just seems like things are falling off the tracks or kind of going astray. We have a great video for you. It'll pop up on the screen right now about 3 ways that your nonprofit loses trust. And as you figure these out, we believe that your nonprofit can easily start gaining trust in your community and be able to start bringing in those people who want to help you, want to support you, want to partner with you. We'll see you there.